Welcome to today's webinar, Embracing Automation for Smoother, Smarter Inventory Management, sponsored by RecRe and brought to you by Athletic Business. I'm Andy Berg, Executive Editor of Athletic Business, excuse me. In today's discussion, we'll explore the impact of inventory loss, access limitations, and complex management systems on campus gyms and community centers, and learn innovative automated strategies to overcome these hurdles. You'll be in good hands with today's presenters who have a wealth of knowledge on the topic. Griffin Harrington is the co-founder and CEO of RecRe, and Jason Levy is Campus Relations Manager at RecRe. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone that you can enter questions in the questions tab of your control panel at any point, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. With that said, Griffin and Jason, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm really excited to get a chance to speak with you all today. Today's going to be pretty fun. Like Andy mentioned, we're going to be talking about how automation can improve your recreation centers, operations, facilities, the user experience. But before we get started, I'll just give a little bit of context. Jason and I and the RecRe team are relatively new to the athletic business world. We went to our first National Athletic Business Expo just last year in Baltimore and got a chance to speak with what felt like hundreds or thousands of people that came by the booth, and we got to interact with and meet a bunch of other vendors in the space. But we've been a really big part of the NERSO world on the higher ed side on campus for the last couple of years. I founded this company about 3.5 years ago, and one of the great things of founding a company and being part of and building a team is having great people around. And so, while I'm the co-founder, CEO, and we'll talk about kind of where this idea came from, I'm really excited to have Jason on our team joining us. He's our account manager and comes with couple decades of experience working on college campuses in a bunch of different roles and in a bunch of campuses across the country. And so he comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and has been working with us for the last 6 months, kind of helping bring the campus view internal while the rest of the team's focused on building up with campus rec centers, community rec centers, and public parks, like we'll talk about here in a second. But before we jump into the solutions, we kind of need to establish like what are the problems that exist in rec centers across the country, and then we'll dive into how automation can solve some of those problems. So Jason, why don't you get us started?
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Griffin. It's great to meet everybody on virtual platform and talk with you a little bit today. I'm really excited to be with everyone. So a couple of things that we really want to talk through at the very top end of this process are the challenges related to equipment availability and the challenges related to staffing. As you can probably guess, automating the process really adds some levels of equipment transparency and availability for each of your programs and services that you're providing to your patrons, visitors, and guests. Equipment availability really does pose a challenge. It's all those things that are behind a door or in a closet or behind an office, and that folks need to ask for. And we know about 50% of our people are more interested in engaging with technology, or not necessarily technology, with a person, engaging with a person in the same way as they used to be. So if we can get some of those things out into the public space, that's really helpful. Some of the challenges with getting that equipment out is that, we really want to make sure that our patrons have a great experience, and we want them to have great interactions, both with the technology and with the people that work with us in our facilities. And staffing has become a real challenge for everyone in this industry and across a variety of industries related. So that staffing pain point certainly comes to play. In addition, some of the challenges related to equipment, we have inventory loss and damage, and that happens on a pretty regular basis, where someone will take an item and break it, or they'll bring it back damaged in a way that they can't be used again, or they won't bring it back at all. And some of the real challenges are the way that we track that process takes a lot of time and a lot of energy from people. It also can be a place where there is a lack of accountability if folks take shortcuts in their tracking process or in that access management tool that they have created or that they're using. And that lack of accountability makes a situation where folks don't always have the best interests of the rec center or the equipment at heart. And with, with that pain point of accountability, it's hard to assign responsibility to people and then figure out what to do next with that. And then just that transparency of equipment inventory is critically important. We want to make sure that folks know what we have, know how to get it, have an easy access path to get all that inventory and use it, and have that equipment to have that really positive recreation experience that we hope that they get. One of the great things about this is that we can potentially put some of these automated systems in place at some outpost spaces, and Griffin's going to talk a little bit about that and some of the diverse recreational spaces that we hope to manage.
Yeah, we call any space that's not in the core rec center an outpost space. It's kind of our vocabulary that we use internally. But to get there, I'll give you a little bit of where this idea for Recre came from. I live in Brooklyn, New York. During the height of COVID, it was renting a city bike, a shared bike out in the outside was one of the only things I felt like I could do that was like safe out there. And I was on a city bike one day that I rented for $2 and rode past a public park here in the city, all these incredible public parks throughout New York City, and just rented a $2 bike, but got to a public park and didn't have the basketball on me, with me to like go play basketball in the park. And that I kind of asked myself, like, what is a basketball court without the ball, right? If I was just able to rent this bike on the side of the road, there's 18,000 city bikes all over the city. Why aren't there basketballs or tennis rackets or soccer balls waiting for me to rent, just like I did the bike, in public space? And that very, very small idea became what Recre is today. And it really, we designed the system around these outpost spaces in mind. And so we think about these outpost spaces as outdoor IM courts, public green spaces, parks, outdoor rec facilities and adventure spaces, kind of anywhere that's physically distant, either just outside or across a campus or across the city, that you might manage from a central rec center if you don't have staff or the same level of insight in these outpost locations. There could be a ton of challenges to manage all the operations and have that space be efficient and operational and have the same user experience, recreational moment that you'd have in the central rec center. It's tough to replicate that service out in these outpost spaces, like we call them. And so to dive into that a little bit further, I'll throw it back to Jason to really key in on some of those things.
Yeah, so there's a number of existing process challenges, and the cumulative effect of those challenges can really change efficiency potential and your patron experience, right? Your guests and patrons want to have this great experience and they want to be super efficient about that. A lot of our folks that are using our spaces and programs have an hour and they want to be able to get in, do their thing, and get out really efficiently, or they have less time than that. So there's some bottlenecks that we see in the operational process. If you have one person working at a desk giving out items and there are 5 people in line, some things like that. There are financial strains on the operational process. Again, you can't have multiple desks in multiple places in multiple locations outside of your fundamental core. And it's challenging. It's just challenging to financially manage all of those operational processes. And then capacity for maintenance and programming, we're certainly seeing the process has a maintenance side, whether it's maintaining those desks or maintaining the inventory. All of those bits and pieces come together in a way that impact operational outcomes. And then the staff piece is really critical, right? So if we have one staff member who's got 10 people in front of them trying to give out equipment, that's going to lead them down a path of being potentially less interested in doing that role. And they're going to have a shorter amount of time and a shorter window to have that positive engagement with that patron. And then if the workload is significant enough, they're going to have a challenge to their decision-making process. So we want to make sure that the staff have a great experience. So the operation works real well, the staff work real well, and that positively impacts the user. Some of the negative points in the process for users are long wait times, really cumbersome processes to check out equipment. Again, that transparency of inventory and what's available to people. And then because of all the associated challenges, they're getting a worse experience and potentially a worse experience in the process. We've seen lots of these challenges in some of our clients, and some, we have thousands of rentals, and hundreds of people that are using these things every day. And we want to make sure that people are taking items and using them efficiently and effectively, and then bringing them back. We want to make sure the folks aren't walking out the back door or breaking the equipment and leaving it where they're going. And adding that layer of responsibility and accountability is super important. And again, harkening back to NERSA and that NERSA engagement, we talked to one school at a conference that's losing $1,200 in basketballs in a month. $1,200 worth of basketballs is a lot of basketballs. And if there's ways that the automation process can trim just that expense, then it becomes a worthwhile value proposition. So we're going to turn back over to the power of automation, and Griffin's going to actually launch a couple of poll questions for us.
Yeah, before we get too far, I think now is the opportunity where the athletic business staff will be able to hit a poll, and so there should be a poll button here. There we go. We're just going to take a couple seconds here. Shot clock is on. We'll keep this up for 24 seconds, and hopefully, if you all can go through and answer these questions now, we'll see how the whole group, if these challenges ring true, and what other challenges we'll be able to talk through. Also, in the meantime, if you have any other ideas or questions that have come up so far about, or just comments about other challenges that you see that kind of seem similar, seem in the same realm, this is your chance to throw it in the chat, and we'll address it as we go through the next part of the presentation, which is the fun part. Kind of talk about some of the solutions. All right, we'll give this one another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we can move on to that next poll question. Right on. So yeah, once you all get a chance to answer these questions, then we'll be able to talk about some solutions and kind of uncover how automation can really improve your operational efficiency. So we'll give this one a couple more seconds, and then hopefully we'll be able to share the poll results maybe at the end, and see if all these problems ring true, and see what are the biggest problems that you all have. So it looks like in the last question, lack of suitable management technologies was one of the biggest challenges that you all saw. And then right behind it was budget constraints, which totally rings true. I mean, it's funny, budget constraints is such a complicated one to get at. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then if we can end this poll and jump on in, sweet. Now, are we all back? All right. So we'll talk about some of those answers in a second, just while we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of people here. So we'll dive into some of the solutions around those problems that Jason laid out. So we've got a slide here that now kind of addresses how automation can solve some of those challenges that Jason just laid out. Automation can be useful in a bunch of categories, but these are three that we see from, our team has we've visited dozens of campuses and dozens of centers and dozens of parks and all these different spaces, and really learned a lot about how these challenges have worked. But we also get a chance to see automation solving a lot of those challenges, and how automation is a big one is improving your operational efficiency, which is reducing human error kind of across the board in a lot of categories. In time tracking and inventory tracking, in reservation systems. We'll talk a lot about how those technologies are, but the reduction of human error is a huge one. And then lowering costs. If you're able to be more efficient about your daily activities and your daily operations, then you're just going to be able to reduce costs across the board to help some of those budget constraints. If you're able to add automation, then you'll be able to reduce budget constraints elsewhere. Staff improvements, Jason mentioned it, but if you're able to add automation to help reduce the need for some of those repetitive transactional moments, and improve the experience of your staff on a daily basis, then it's going to, one, make each staff member more efficient from an operational perspective, but also give your staff members a more enjoyable experience, to reduce turnover and provide a better experience for the staff, to have more interactions with your patrons, with your park goers, with your rec center patrons. And if you're able to improve the daily experience of your staff through having some of their tasks be automated, then you're able to hold on to staff and build a higher quality staff because they've got a better experience on a daily basis. And then you're able to get insight into how your rec center is actually automating. If you've got some of those data generating automation, which we'll talk about in a second, that can be such a critical component for you as the administrator of the space to understand how your space is actually being utilized. And then we'll talk about this in a second, but the user experience when there's automation involved, and we live in a digital world, in a fast-paced, you want it this way now, and automation is very often the way to get a more frictionless experience that the daily park goer, the daily rec center goer, the daily student is really looking for, and have an experience that like really streamlines their experience and allows for that human connection to be possible in the moments where it makes the most sense, and it's not just a transactional moment, but it's an important, impactful moment. And so not just like talking buzzwords, we're talking experiences. We have gotten to work with a bunch of great vendors in the space and get to learn from a lot of people that have built automated technologies and implemented automated technologies in direct centers across the country. And some of these are obvious, but some of them like are kind of a good reminder what automation can really do. And so this is hopefully a way for you to like uncover a thought that then allows you to bring automation back into your rec center, or think about how you're not leveraging a piece of data that you might be generating on a daily basis, but it just might have blended into the background. And so the place to start there, I mean, is the turnstiles, these like self-access doors that are now prevalent in so many rec centers and so many spaces where you're able to have like either counters or swipe access and kind of member access. Those front doors are an incredible form of automation, an incredible form of being able to turn a repetitive task into a data generating tool that you as a recreational administrator has a lot more insight into how your space is, how many people are coming in your space, who's the demographic. It's a really dependable way to understand how your space is being utilized. Kind of in that same vein, this one's a little bit out there, but we've seen at a bunch of college campuses, specifically these people counters, these either LiDAR scanning or just like door open counters is a really, really powerful way to have simple automation come into your like daily data dump. If we see constantly where there's rec centers where they have a student or just a staff member walk around and count the heads of people in certain spaces at a certain time and talk about human error, that is an opportunity for there just to be a ton of guesswork. And these people counting, either hardware or softwares, and depending on how a certain space is being utilized, you can really get a sense of did that person who reserved this room actually come, and how many people showed up. If you're able to understand how your space is being utilized and trust the data that you're generating, you can make much better decisions about your staffing allocation, what programs are actually being utilized versus being underutilized, and it's able to improve your daily decision making and then your annual decision making for your budgets of where you actually want to put money based on how people are utilizing your spaces. This towel tracker software is one that particularly stands out. Using RFID, they're able to, there's a couple companies in business, but there's one at our partners at Boise State, which we'll talk about in a second. They just implemented a really cool towel tracker that if you're able to rent out a towel using an RFID reader, it's able to remember who the person is that got the towel out, and then when you bring it back, it knows that you brought it back. And that's like such a small thing, but in rec centers, like that can be such a bottleneck that like reduces the user experience. It reduces the patron to like either have to wait in line or I know I brought it back. It wasn't me, it was the staff member behind the desk. It creates all this friction where it's an automated tool that's able to actually keep track, and there's a lack of that human error. Reservation software. All of those outpost spaces, you need to know who's having access to the IM fields, the adventure areas, like all this stuff. I'm sure if you're on this call, you have a reservation software. You might like it, you might not. But these reservation softwares become incredibly powerful tools when utilized properly and built with a modern rec center in mind. And so that's like a really powerful function. And then what we're doing here, what Recre does, we're all about inventory management and using technology. So the way that our system works is we've got these lockers, these pieces of hardware where a user would walk up, scan a QR code that's on the locker. They use their mobile device, their personal phone, pick what they want, and then when they authenticate somehow, either through the membership or their student ID or credit card or whatever you decide to have as your authentication measure, they pick what they want. The door pops open automatically. They grab the basketball, the spike ball, the tennis racket, whatever you've put behind the locker. All the inventory in these lockers are yours. The system remembers who had that item and how long that item's been out. You're able to set how long you want the basketball to be available for free, or versus the spike ball. You can have the basketball out for 2 hours, but the spike ball you could have for 8 hours. It's totally up to you to manage the system. And all this data that's being generated by these rentals and by the system becomes we've seen it now working with a bunch of our campus partners, how powerful the data insight is when you have an insight into what inventory is being used in what space. And so to kind of go back to the outpost idea, we'll talk about this in some of our campus partners, but if you put a box that's filled with basketballs right next to a basketball court, you now have a basketball next to the basketball court. It's right there. It's like if the recreational moment's going to happen, you've now made it possible. You've got the inventory next to the space. And this is like what we found to be the best way to do that, is to have the inventory directly near the space in a visible locker that showcases how it's possible. Our system improves the accountability of who had what when. It gives you a sense into how much inventory is being utilized and when it's being utilized, and that whole like $1,200 of basketball loss in a single month doesn't happen, because you know who had it, and then if it doesn't come back, you know who to talk to, so you don't lose basketballs anymore. And then this becomes a really powerful tool. So this is our version of automation on how we help the rec center, but there's a lot, just like we just talked about, there's a lot of automation that exists in a rec center across the board that you can tap into to generate and really visualize how data from automation becomes part of your decision-making platform. And then I'll give it to Jason to talk about a specific use case that we have at Rutgers University.
Thanks, Griffin. So you can see the image of the 2 Rutgers boxes that are down on the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. We place these boxes inside the main entrance of their student recreation center. It's their primary student recreation center. They have multiple on campus. And these boxes are in between the entrance to the center and the entrance to the multi-sport court area. And there's basketballs and volleyballs and a lot of badminton that's going on in there, and some other items that students can get. Well, anybody can get. It's not just students. Patrons can get. Again, Griffin talked about this. Folks walk up to the box, they scan a QR code, they get their item, and then they go use it and bring it back. In this case, we moved the items closer to where the items are being used, and we took away some of the responsibility of a student employee sitting at a desk. So we've unloaded that student employee to be able to do some other things. In this particular case, they had a student building manager like person who was managing the inventory, and now that student building manager person can then go out and do other things like checking on what's being used and how it's being used and engaging with student clients, being more visible in the center. We onboarded this in one morning. We brought the boxes to campus and we set them up, and we already had inventory ready to go, and onboarding went really smoothly. And by lunchtime, we had the boxes up and running and people could use them. And the adoption from the very beginning was very fast and worked out really well. That day I was there and we had 5-6 people in the first few minutes. And as I was leaving at 5 o'clock, there were 4 or 5 people standing in front of the boxes, just clamoring to get items to go. And there was very little direction and not a lot of oversight in that process. Students, in this case, primarily figured out how to use the boxes pretty quickly. And then, we put up some signage and shared some more education. The analytics are amazing. There's hundreds of users and thousands of rentals in several weeks' time. And then you can start to see when people are using the items and what the most popular items are and when those popular items are. And if you have the ability to gather some demographic information, you also know a little bit about your user and use case. And when you put all of that together, it makes for a powerful decision tool that allows you to know which inventory to have in these locations and when to have them open and more accessible. So it's a strong tool in a variety of ways. Again, we talked about labor efficiency and staff retraining. Imagine if you had the opportunity through the reduction of weight for a particular staff member to have that person do other things through the automation of simple work process. We're getting those things that folks may or may not want to do as their day-to-day all the time, and making them easy for the patron guest user to do in an automated way. And Griffin's going to talk about 3 other examples from our workshop.
Yeah, I'll also remind you, we probably have just a couple more slides. So if you have any questions that have built up throughout this presentation so far, now is the time to drop it in the chat and we'll get to those in a second. Jason just outlined Rutgers, which is a great use case, and Boise State was one of our early partners, and they've got a very similar use case. They've got 2 of our units in 2 different locations in their primary rec center. One of them is, 18 inches away from the main basketball court, and this one is filled with basketballs, both men and women's size basketballs. This is being rented, like these basketballs now are being monitored and tracked and have accountability over who has these basketballs, and these things are used all day. And it's really obvious to a student that's coming to the center now, where do I get the basketballs? Oh, it's through this visual see-through locker where you can see the basketballs that are inside the box. I grab the basketball, go play, bring it back right as I walk out. This is about as good as a location as we have on our entire platform, where it's 18 inches away from the location where it showcases. Boise, at the same time, they brought in our automated system. They brought in that towel tracker. And so campuses like Boise are just really good showcases of building an automated solution kind of across the board. These 2 other locations are perfect for this, really hitting this outpost space kind of conversation we've been talking about. We work with places that aren't college campuses as well, and one of those examples is the Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's a park, I still live in Brooklyn, and this park's about a mile from me right now, and this is one of the best public spaces that I think exists in the country. I am biased, but it's beautiful. And this box is being used dozens of times a day, constantly being rented out with pickleball, basketball, ping pong, handball. It's a way for any park goer to go get free access in Brooklyn to any inventory that activates this public space. And it's just a beautiful showcase of if you have the inventory in the location, then you will we get feedback all the time from this box from tourists or just random New Yorkers who are so thankful to have access to the inventory because they're now able to utilize the park in spontaneous moments that they weren't like fully intentionally going to play basketball or play spike ball, but now they have access to it. And then Texas A&M University of Commerce has they've got this great IM field it's far off campus. It's at least a half mile to a mile away from like the student union, the rec center. And so far away from the desk where you'd get your tennis racket, your softball, your volleyball, all these items to like activate this massive IM field that they have out there. Now under this like just shed pavilion space that they've got one of our lockers there. It's filled with all the inventory that keeps this outpost space active all the time. And this is such a great showcase where you can have a primary rec center, and then you can have an IM field, and you can have your traditional inventory management in your primary center because you've got the staff and the visibility and the access there. But if you've got any of these ancillary spaces, these outpost locations, this is such a powerful way to make those spaces active if you're able to point students to go directly there and have them interact with the space in the way that you're intending them, and then you hope they can use it if the inventory is waiting for them. So that that access, that visibility, and that staff constraint is now not a problem because they're able to have all the inventory there. Now, Jason, can you bring this home and wrap us up and kind of talk about how some of these automated solutions, what's the return on this? Why is this important?
Yeah, thanks, Griffin. So for all of you out there, you've seen this slide. We've talked about these images in a couple different places, but now we're really coming back to the why and the ROI and the benefits of these solutions. So I think that we've made it fairly clear, and I hope that you see that by automating the process and adding a little bit of technology and savvy, that you can reduce inventory loss and increase the control of your inventory items through the automated process. You can certainly improve and expand the access to those items by putting them in those outpost spaces or getting them closer to the locations where people, your patrons, patrons, partners, students want to use them. And you could potentially make them available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or at an expanded schedule based on where the items are. There are some certain reduced costs and return on investment to purchasing and automating or leasing or however you get to the automated process. The costs go down as it relates to inventory loss. The costs go down as it relates to staff time and energy. And then the return on that investment, in addition to just the cost savings, is also that you have an expanded view of who's getting the stuff, where they're getting it, and when they're using it, so that you can then make great decisions with it as a return on investment data point. And then we believe that there's a lot of improvement in user engagement in the automated process. So taking that automation and putting it into place really helps that user have that great recreation experience where they want it, where they need it. And you can put things in a great place for success. There's some really interesting trends and insight that comes out of the data, specifically talking about expanded access. We have operational partners that have extended their hours in the morning and extended their hours in the evening, not necessarily always with hard and fast staff schedules. So you have a staff person come in and open the building, and maybe instead of having two people there, one to open the doors and one to give out items, you can have one person there in the box, or the automated process of the giving the towel or the item happens without a person. And then in the evenings in particular, in the student-focused areas, we know that students want to play and engage and activate that space after 7 p.m. So having those items available. And then we look at the duration of time that people can keep their items. And we're seeing, from our perspective in the data, we're seeing an average rental duration increase, where if people have to engage with a person and they have to manage their time a little bit more formally, that the average rental duration goes up using an automated system. Throughout our inventory, throughout our environment, we're as close to 100% rental return items as you can get, because we know who the person is and they're tied to our process with their name or their email or their cell phone number. They have an ethic of care about returning those items to the box, and they also want to be able to use it again, and they want others to be able to use it. And then the on-time piece is where we're tweaking the process. Folks, return their items, but sometimes they return them late for a variety of reasons. There is automation in that where folks get notifications about when their rental is due. And then if the rental is late, they get the notification about that as well. And that's usually the motivator to return to the box or return to the process to return their item either on time or late so that we get it back. And the great thing is we're just using all those data and insights to help us make decisions and hold our folks accountable and provide a great experience for them wherever the automation is happening.
Yeah, I'll hit on, I mean, just to wrap that last bit up, when we started this company, I was so concerned that like the items just wouldn't come back. And that is just, we've been blown away by it. But when there's some accountability built into the identification of the individual renting the item out, we now see it after tens of thousands of rentals. However, we've got so many rentals across our platform, and colleges and parks and these other community spaces, the items almost always come back through this automated process. And so it's able to, if you have a staff member focused on checkouts for 8 hours a day, we now see that it takes 5 to 8 minutes a week to do the same level of inventory management when you've got an inventory system that's like a Recrebox that is in that space. It reduces the oversight and management drastically when you've dialed it in, when you've got that system going, and the managing all that inventory goes down. The time goes down so dramatically that it becomes a really powerful operational efficiency driver. And that's what we got. I think I hopefully there's a bunch of questions. Jason, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, but I wanted to go back to the two poll questions and just really have an interesting tie. As a person who was working on college campuses and administrator for a long time, the two top pieces from the two top questions, lack of management technology and insufficient budget and staff, play together so well on each other to really help people be motivated to look for automated solutions. And I was a student union director on a college campus, on multiple college campuses. And one of the things that I struggled with when I first met Griffin in this company was, I don't want to replace my student staff, or I don't want to replace my team with a box. I spent my career building student employment systems and processes. But over time, as we see students or entry-level employees wanting to do less and less, and having less and less money to do some of those things, really lends itself to the the adoption of automated processes. So it worked out well.
Great. Some amazing information here, guys, as well as a number of questions from the audience. So we'll jump right in.
Love it.
Real simple. Are these safe to put outdoors?
Yes, we've got a bunch of these outdoors. We try to put them under some level of like overhang to against crazy weather, but we've got them outdoors in Texas, New York. We're putting them outside in California and Florida. So these things are getting, they're able to be outside.
Nice. Are they particular models that go outdoors, or are they just all?
We build them all pretty tough. We were really worried about college freshmen and how they treat these units, and so we built them with them in mind, and built with outdoor Brooklyn in mind, right? Like we built these things intentionally so that they could take a bit of a beating.
Nice. All right. And how do you know if the piece of equipment being checked out is being returned? And will the box be able to confirm that an item checked out wasn't switched with a different item that was returned?
It's a classic question. We were really worried about that one too. And we tried to originally totally over-engineer that problem, where we were really worried about the like Indiana Jones like switch out problem, where you're going to take out the idle away and switch it with something else. And that just hasn't rung true after the thousands and thousands of rentals. The way that our system works is that when you return an item through the web app, through the phone web system, you have to take a photo of the item back inside the locker to officially end that rental. And that visual confirmation is communicated to the user before the rental even begins. And so that psychology reminds
for them to say,
that's the item that's got to come back. Right. And that's been an incredibly powerful use. And so not every rental is perfect. I mean, you saw 7% of our rentals don't come back on time. And there's also some of those rentals that they aren't replaced with the proper inventory. But we've built in a strike system into our backend admin panel that our administrative partners are able to go in and administer strikes to their users that are texted to the person that when they receive a strike. And that then the item almost always comes back in the original form. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was the right one. It's like, yep, that's why you got a strike. And if you get 3 strikes, then you're not allowed to rent from the system again. And so that strike system has become a really powerful form of a carrot or of a stick instead of the carrot, right? It's like a way to like make sure that the inventory actually comes back on time and it's the right piece of inventory.
Yeah, Jason, anything to add there?
No, the picture is just a huge piece that really adds value to the end of the rental process.
And the administrator has through our backend admin panel, you're able to see the photo right next to the rental for every rental. So you're able to really quickly go through the photos that are uploaded to the system and get a sense if the basketball is a water bottle, then you know something's wrong.
Yeah, right. Is the software required for Recre? Is Recre software required, or is it capable of integration with other software like Fusion?
The software is required to have the hardware on site. We build the inventory management system really specifically to the hardware, and are really trying to push and build out features that our campus partners and community center partners and parks partners request of us. And so we're able to own and build as much of the feature set really specifically for our customers in mind. So it's you get a Recre box, it comes with the software that is able to operate the system.
All right. Can you tell us how the checkout process has worked within rec centers? So they're looking for a specific use case. They're wary of adding an extra step for checkout when everything is already tied to their student IDs and rec management software. They're looking to increase automation due to rising cost of labor.
Totally, this is a big one. Boise State's a great use case. So Boise, they made an assumption that if you're through the turnstiles at the front door of their core rec center, they didn't want to add another level of like authentication that has to happen, where you have to prove that you're a member somehow or prove that you're a Boise student. They made the assumption that if you're in the building, you've passed through the first line of like our system, that it should be really, really easy to get the piece of inventory out. And so we've designed a feature set for Boise specifically, where a user, because it's both students and non-students that use but students and community members that use the Boise State Rec Center, they just use their phone number to authenticate one time to make sure that phone number is the phone that you're using, and then that phone number gets associated to your identification. And that way, all you have to do is scan the QR code, type your phone number in, and then you're able to rent from the system. So it probably wouldn't be the same if the box was out in Boise's downtown or Boise's in an outdoor environment. You probably want some level of authentication to happen there to make sure that you really know who has that item. But once you're through the turnstile, then they made the assumption that we already know that you're accredited to rent, and so we make it super fast, where it takes seconds to get access to a specific item when you have your phone with you.
Sure. Let's see here.
Love the questions. Hopefully they keep coming.
These are great questions. I really like this idea for outpost areas with less inventory, but specifically related to a main multi-purpose area. We have a large inventory. Usually, visually, it looks like we would need 6 of these if one basketball is in each cubby, for example. How do larger areas implement this most effectively, and how is damaged equipment tracked?
Totally. Oh man, that's a great question. It's something we think about a lot. Part of it is like, if you go back to that, I go back to that Boise example. We try to really think about locations where this proximity to location is possible. And so the way that if there's a massive multiplex, I think about trying to get the inventory as close to the location where the inventory is utilized as possible. So you're able to activate all those different areas as close to possible. That also being said, we have partners who get 4 or 5 or 6 of these units all at the same time and kind of create like a locker bay on a wall, and they're able to showcase all the inventory that's available. And you can see here through these 4 photos, we make these in a wide range of configurations and sizing so that we can handle we talk about it like football size, basketball size, and cornhole size boxes. And that way you're able to manage a wide range of inventory that you make available. And so the amount of cubbies you bring, we'd have a conversation, we'd identify the configuration that works best for you, and then come up with a configuration that we think would work best. Anything to add there, Jason?
Yeah, so the second part of that process is, how do you make sure that the inventory comes back? The adoption and the information that is shared from the beginning. Not only did we build the back end and the user experience to be very informative to that student, that patron, that guest that's using the box and interacting with the box, but it's also really customizable. So you can put in, terms and conditions that they have to agree to if you choose to do that. You can customize the language on some of the screens to share, that if you don't return these items, then there will be this consequence. But the vast majority of the time, we've got some interesting use cases, a whole locker full of graphing calculators on a campus where people come to campus and don't have a graphing calculator for their math class, and they use one out of a box for an hour and then put it back. Those graphing calculators are a couple $100 or however much they cost. And, the value prop for that student when they're engaging is that this is going to be here the next time. And part of the way that we encourage our partners on campus or in the centers that we work is that they do daily box reviews, right? So they're going out to the box at the end of the day or once a week, depending on what their volume is, to just check in on the box and make sure that the inventory is still there. From the software, the management team knows from the software what's in the box, how long it's been there, if it's late. All of those things create notifications, as you would imagine. But then going out and checking on the box just gives that second layer of very small in-person management to make sure that everything's okay.
Yeah, I'll add one tidbit there. There's a feed on top of the photo. We also give the opportunity for students or users to drop in a little bit of feedback about how the rental went and rate the rental 1 through 5 stars. We see that when an item breaks during a regular rental, that is an opportunity where there's like a asynchronous way for the user to tell the administrator, hey, this broke while it happened, this is what happened, so sorry. And then it's up to the administrator to decide, was that malicious or was that just wear and tear? And then it's not going to stop your basketball from popping, but it's going to allow you the opportunity to communicate with the person who popped it to check if it was an accident or on purpose. The other thing to add as well, is the photo is like such a powerful tool to go back to and see the quality of the inventory, and that can be like a really quick scroll to go through.
All right. Back to the outdoor units, or one placed outdoor. This audience member is asking, what are the power requirements?
Yeah, this is beauty. It plugs in with a simple 110 outlet, so a standard like just wall outlet. You plug it in. There's also electrical outlets, like a USB and a just a standard outlet inside of every cubby. So if you have a Bluetooth speaker, or if you have an esports space in a community center, then you can charge game systems and stuff between rentals, or you can plug it up if it's in an outdoor environment where you're going to see some weather. You just cover up that electrical outlet so that it's not accessible and available, and weatherproof it a little bit. And so we make these really accessible for indoor and outdoor locations. It's connected through either an LTE or Wi-Fi connection. So you truly, one of us on our team would show up in one of the shirts, we'd plug it in, we teach you how to use the backend admin panel, and it takes about an hour to like run through the system, how the whole thing works. You connect it to Wi-Fi, or we run on LTE, and then you've got an automated inventory management system. It's a really pretty simple deployment process.
Nice. Another, just a good segue, you mentioned LTE or network. What does maintenance look like in terms of work orders and network issues?
Totally. Depending on what connection we run, if it's LTE, it's all of our phone providers these days have had their share of like service requirements, and so we're also affected when there's cellular outages in a network. So we're just kind of connected to your Verizon or your AT&T or whatever the strongest connection is in the region we connect to. And then, if the power goes out, then the power goes out, and then the system will automatically reboot once power comes back. And so we do see that sometimes in our outpost locations, is that we try to work really closely with the facility to understand the power constraints, and if there's a system that might have power outages every once in a while, we have some communication that we can provide in the app that explains that to users and tries to get around it. But we are constrained to the connection or power outages of a location. In terms of maintenance, these things are sheet metal lockers that can take a bit of a beating. We've got these again out in Brooklyn and outdoor locations kind of across the country. And so the doors are rated for hundreds of thousands of opens, but the door is the primary failure point, you would say, the door and the lock. And so we've got a couple options depending on how the park or the campus or the rec center or the community center interacts with us. You can purchase or lease our lockers. We make a range of contractual options available. There's warranties associated where thankfully these things are super easy, and so there's a little bit of a self-maintenance that's possible. Or if there's malicious intent to a locker, then we'll send one of our team. But we also work with a network of maintenance, a national network of maintenance suppliers who are able to kind of handle most of the problems that happen. But thankfully, we've designed something that's like really pretty simple, and a lot of it can be communicated just through email on how to make a small adjustment when necessary.
Great. And so in terms of the network connection, so does RecRe handle the cost of that, or do you work with carriers and then that they don't have to worry about that?
Yeah, we've got it's one of our kind of best pieces of the hardware. We've got our own custom operation inside of the unit that manages the whole process. That we work with the carriers, we work with the IoT providers to plug it in, decide what the best connection is going to be for the location, and then truly all you got to do is plug it in, and it turns on, and it's operational.
Nice. Let's see here. What are the overall costs per unit within an indoor space? Example, a towel tracker.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something you want to deal with, in terms of.
Totally. Every space is different. Every like kind of talking about the 6 units in an outdoor location activating a multiplex compared to 1 or 2 units indoors. We work with each of our partners individually to understand your inventory needs, your management needs. And so if you want to reach out to either Jason or myself, we can have a quick conversation to talk pricing, because it truly is, we designed these solutions for each individual use case, because it's truly not, it's a one doesn't necessarily fit all, but we've got configurations that can match a lot of different use cases. So You can lease the units, you can buy the units. We make these, we work with a wide range of partners, but there are versions of this. So you want to reach out to Jason or myself. Here, I'll put this back on. If you go to our website, you can go to recrebox.com and just fill in the form, or just email Jason directly, jason@recrebox.com, and we can find some time to talk about your specific use case.
Great. Lastly, obviously these generate a ton of data. What kinds of trends do you guys see? And I know you talked a little bit about this, Griffin, but what are you guys seeing in terms of that data?
Totally. I mean, there's so many directions we can go there. I think one of the most interesting things that I'm excited to learn more about is provide inventory insights broadly for rec centers across the country, based on what inventory lasts the longest, what inventory gets the most positive feedback, down to the brand. Like if we're able to tell what a Nike basketball's feedback is compared to a Wilson ball, then like talk about the operational efficiency that can happen based on like what inventory you should buy. And we can be really predictive and subscriptive on how you can serve your recreational center better because of all the inventory insights that we've gained from our nationwide network. The other thing I'm always excited about internally across our company, we talk about activating space. And we think about that in a lot of ways, but in rec centers specifically, that post 7 p.m. usage, I think is going to be one of the most interesting areas for us to like key into and continue to serve, where if you're able to add more opportunities for recreation late into the evening because of the not as much staff is needed or no staff is needed in certain areas, and you're able to provide access and visibility into what inventory is available, I think you'll be able to interact and have positive engagement moments with your patrons literally for another 4 or 5 hours a day in that late night hour if the inventory was accessible. So all of a sudden you could add hours of accessible space and hours a day to, you know, that turns into hundreds, thousands of hours a year of more accessible time that you're able to have with your patrons if there's automated services that allows the space to be activated late at night. And that I think can only reasonably cost prohibitively happen with automation. So that's one of the trends that we're most excited about, is to see that if we're able to help a recreation center be accessible for 3, 4, 5 hours a day, what does that mean? Like how much more can happen in that space, and how much more does that space get utilized if you have that extra accessibility? What about you, Jason? What trends do you see?
So again, going back to my time on campus, I'm looking at some interesting trends on what kinds of things people are using in the boxes on college campuses. And we're in student unions and rec centers and residence life locations. And some of our campus partners are just doing some really interesting things, like putting RC cars in boxes or using virtual reality glasses. You know, there's some things that I think people are going to start to use more and more in a wider range of our boxes. That's going to help with engagement in a way that is unique and dynamic. And I'd like to focus a little bit more of that on, you know, what are the items that could go in a box for a rec center that elevate the experience for the user as much as create initial engagement with a basketball or with a volleyball, but what's that next level of engagement? So looking forward to seeing people doing really interesting and you know, kind of far afield items depending on where they are.
Dare you say outside the box?
I wasn't going to say it. I used it for another presentation, but I wasn't going to say it.
That's great. Good note to end things on. I just want to say thank you to everybody that joined us today. Jason and Griffin, this is really a great product and one that I think is going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of facilities out there, facility operators. And thank you to Recre again for sponsoring things today. And I believe the recording will be available if anybody wants to, you know, check in on that or listen to something maybe you didn't catch. And then also the reach out to Griffin and Jason right there at the contact if you need any information or are interested. So again, thanks to everybody, and join us on our next webinar.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Andy. Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
one.